In this video, we are going to see how to create AngularJS mini project. This is the contact list. As you can see, you can save your friend's contact list in this application. This is a single page application created using AngularJS and with the backend mysql. You can see test the database, and these are the tables, these are the columns inside the table contact. You will get the backup as well. You'll get the source code in the description box to follow along. Fine. Now if you enter your friend's name and your friend's contact number and click on add, you see the contact list has been added on the same page without the page is getting reloaded. That is with the help of AngularJS. Fine. You can see there is the validation as well. It says if the input field is left blank, it shows insert the appropriate field. Now the phone is blank, that's why it's showing the error. Now if you add, you'll get the message data inserted, and you can see it's inside the table as well. Fine. You'll get the source code here, and these are the section which we are going to follow. This is the first step, insert into database using AngularJS, and these are the steps included for that module, and this is to fetch the data from database, and these are the additional steps, and finally update data on clicking update button. Fine. Now we are finally getting into the first module, which is, let me show you the HTML. You'll get the source code. Inside the source code, this is how it looks. You have to get into the HTML. We'll start the AngularJS from scratch. Let me comment it. Fine. Now let me explain the HTML for you. We will start the AngularJS from scratch, and this portion is simply the table. Let me comment it for now. We just focused on insert first. Let me remove all the AngularJS directives, that is AngularJS attribute in the HTML, and I'll show you how to add it. Fine. So for that we have, this is the Angular app. So choose the parent div. Here the parent div is simply which holds form and a table, and this is the input field, then the label, and again the input field, and finally the submit button. Fine. This is the parent div which holds the table, and let me make this as an Angular app. To specify it, we have to add ng-app and controller, ng-controller. So what the controller does, controller simply handles what are the fields inside it. We have table, we have input field. We can access these values with the help of controller. We said the controller can access the input field. It can access the input field using the attribute ng-model. Let me add ng-model on each element which I would be accessing in the script. I would be accessing input field, I would be accessing button as well. So let me add ng-click. So when I click on it, I want a function to get triggered. So let's initialize the Angular in the script tag. The first thing what we have to do is we have to create a variable, and that will hold the Angular module, and we have to specify the app name. In our case it's my app, and we have to pass an array as a second parameter, and with the help of the reference variable we need to call the controller function. The controller accepts two parameters. The first one is the controller name, and second the function of the controller. Whatever task it need to be assigned, it would do, we have to pass it inside the function. Fine. Now let me cross check whether now add required. We have completed this. We have also completed, we have defined the controller in the script file as well. Now why do we need scope in controller? Why do we need scope in controller? The controller function accepts two parameter. The first one is scope, the second one is HTTP. We'll look HTTP later. Now let's focus on the scope. So controller can access the ng model using the scope variable. So let's access the click. Let's access this function. To access inside the controller, we need a scope dot the function name. So let's define the function and let me show you. Let me create an alert and let me access the input field. The first input field has ng model name and the second input field has ng model phone. So when the page loads, this is it. So when the page loads, when I click on submit, the function calls these two input field. Let me check. You can see this is the function. Let me refresh it again. I have typed the name and the phone number. If you click on submit, you can see with the help of scope variable we can access the input field individually. Fine. Now what we are going to do is we are going to add a validation to access the input field. As I have already shown you, $scope.name, we can access the first one, $scope.phone, we can access the second input field, and if both the values are null, and then we will show the alert message, that is insert name and insert phone. That's what I'm doing now. So inside if the scope.name is null, then show the alert insert name, else if the input field phone is null, then show insert phone. Let me test and see. If I click on submit, I need the message, that is insert name. Fine, that's working. Then we see, why do we need HTTP? We need HTTP to pass the variable to the server side. So how are we going to pass? Using the $HTTP. So these are the two values. When I click on it, when I click on submit, I want these two input field value to pass to the server. In our case it's PHP that will execute it, and this is a file that is going to execute. And in the second argument we will be passing the two variables we should be sending in the key value pair. The first one is key and the second one is value. The key is always should be surrounded with quotes. So in our case the value is simply the text field, scope.name and scope.phone. We can give any name to the key. Let me name it as send name, and again the send id, send phone, sorry for that. Now these two values we would send it to the file called insert.php. Now let me get into the insert.php first. It says pass the input values to another file. Now these two values would be sent to the insert.php. Now I'm going to explain insert.php. So this is a file. Let's start from scratch. Fine, this is the connection code. It will connect the localhost, our database, which is mysql, and this is the code to get the input values, and I want the input value to be converted to JSON. That's what I did using JSON decode function. Now to prevent the SQL injection, I would be using mysqli underscore real underscore escape underscore string. What it does is it prevent the code from SQL injection. Fine, you can see send name. This is the same send name which we have sent it. We have accessed it over here and we have stored it into a variable. Again the send phone is over here. We have renamed, or we have saved it to a PHP variable. Now we need to pass these two variables inside the query. So insert into the table name with the column name and phone, and these two value we will get as an output, which is data inserted, or if the data is not inserted we will get an error. Fine, these two data can be accessed using the data variable. Let's check. Once the alert shows up, we want the input field to have the value null. That's what I'm specifying. Once the alert is shown, I want the value of the input field to show nothing. Fine, now let me add. At present we have some values. Let me delete it. Let's start from nothing. You can see there is no value in the table. Let me pass a name and a number. If you click on submit, you will see an alert message that shows data inserted. Fine, let me check the database, and inside the table the value is there. Now we are going to send the button name also. Why do we need button name? Because insert operation and update operation are going to be done on the same file. That's why I'm sending the button. Usually we have type input type equal to submit. Now let me change the value. At present, let me give any name. So let me name it as anything. So if you see, submit is transformed to any name. So I want it to convert using Angular. Let me name a variable which is button name, and when the page loads, I want the button name to get the value as my wish. So when the page is refreshed, when the page is refreshed, the script is going to run. When the script runs, the value is assigned to the variable. Now let me name it as add. So let me pass the button name using HTTP, and this button name can be accessed on the insert.php. I have named it as send underscore btn name, and this query I'm going to use a condition. This query will only run when the insert query will only run when the button name is add. If the button name is add, then run the insert query. Fine. Now let's check whether our code is working or not. Let me unline it. Before that, I'm doing this because we are going to do the insert operation and update operation on a single file using the if else condition on the button name. In our case, it's just add. You see, my wish is converted to add when the page loads. We need to add capital add, because on condition if else condition we have used capitalized add. Now if you click on add, the data will be inserted. Fine, that means our condition is working. And if you check the database, and yes, it has been inserted. Now the first part is completed. Now let's get into the second module. Now in this module we are going to fetch data from database and going to display it on a table using AngularJS. And now we are going to see why do we need ng-repeat, and this is the minimum HTML that we need. Heading, table head, which would have 3 columns, and this single table row is going to get repeated until there is some value left on the database. So the value we will be getting from select.php as a JSON format, and we can access that value column name as x dot the name of the column. Here in our case it's name and phone. By this way we can access the column names, column data, and it will repeat until there is some data left on the database. Fine. Finally, on the third column, what we need is we need a button which will have a bootstrap class btn success. It's primary for the blue color. You won't see anything because we haven't run. There is no value on the variable sum JSON value. So let's get into the select.php for that. Now how to access column name from accepted array, we have done that. Create function that should initialize when page loads. This should load once this function, sorry, what I meant is the table is going to get dynamically appended and it will be triggered with a function, and that function should called once the page gets reload. So for that we would use ng-init, and this is a function name that will be called when the page is getting reload, or you can say when the app is loaded on the browser. ng-init, init is simply initialize. Now use ng-init, that's what we did. Now use https to send get request to the select.php file. Select.php file is in the server, so we are sending the get request using HTTP. So this is how we access the function. As I said, to access any function inside the controller, we would be using scope, and get using the get request. The get request will send to the select.php, and in the select.php, let me show you. As we know, these are the connections, and this is the output variable. I'm going to initialize the output as an array. We will be getting the associative array, so that's why I'm placing the output inside the array. Now I'm converting the array into the JSON, and these JSON value I would send it over here on the success. On success, receive the JSON object. We would receive as a data variable, and this data you have to assign it to the table which we have used over here using scope variable. And now your value will be fetched from the database and displayed. You can see it is hard coded. Now what you have to do is you have to pass these two, x.name and x.phone, inside the curly brackets. And now if you refresh, the data will be fetched. Fine. Now let me add update. Now if you see, now that's working. Now let me add another record or contact. Click on add, data inserted, and fine. Now you can see once the page is getting reloaded, that's when the function is running. So what I'm going to do is, when the data is inserted on the table, this function should get called. You can see when we get the alert message that says data inserted, let me type it and show you. If you click on add, you see we are getting the alert that says data inserted, and this is the line. And you can see these two fields are blank. And finally, after the fields are getting blanked, I want the table section to get refreshed. You can see now I'm adding Gary. If you click on add without page refresh, you will see Gary is added. So we have completed the second module as well. Now we have done this as well. Now in the final section, what we are going to do is we are going to update value on the same file, which is insert.php. Let me show you how it's done. Fine. Now if I click on update, I want to pass the name, ID and phone. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the HTML. On update button, I'm going to add a ng-click, add a function ng-click, and create a function, and as a parameter pass the ID, name and phone, so that we can update easily. And this function will accept the parameter x.name, x.id and x.phone. Fine. Now add input type hidden field to pass ID. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function on the controller. Let's call this function using the scope variable. And this function will have three parameters: ID, name and phone. I'm going to get the name input field and the phone input field using $scope.name. Name is simply the ng model, and assign the value y. And assign the phone. Now if you refresh, if you click on update, you can see the name and the phone has been displayed on the input field. Now the id is not there, so for that I'm going to create an input type equal to hidden. We won't be seeing, but while sending value on the server we will fetch the id. Now let me add the id as well. $scope, that is input type equal to hidden, with ng model id, pass the id. Now change the button name to update. So if you click on update, you can see the value is add. We need to change it to update. So for that, use the scope variable and call the button name and make it update. Now if you see, if we click on update, the add will be converted to update. And now send additional data. Previously we have just sent name, phone and button name. Now we need to send the id as well, so that we can update. We can perform update operation. Now access the additional field in insert.php. The same way, just copy it and paste it one more time, and just replace the variable name and assign it to a variable, and use if else condition for update. As like before, we have performed add. Now let me copy paste it for update as well. In this time it will be update, and the query is for update table name, and we have to initialize the id inside it, or else we will get error. This is update query. We will get either two value, that is data inserted or data error. Once data is updated, change the button name to add. If you refresh it, if you click on any value, the data will be populated on the text field. If you want to convert or modify, I have modified to n. If you click on update, you will get a message data inserted. Actually data inserted should not come, the data updated should come. Let me modify it, data updated. And that's how the mini project has been completed. Thank you so much for listening. Get the source code in the description to follow along. This is just a mini project. We will get more projects on the playlist. Thank you so much for listening.